Okay, so I'm obsessed with drawing heads. I'm really drawing portraits because these aren't people who exist. What I'm interested in is trying to develop techniques to make characters from imagination without using reference. That's my ultimate goal. Because in the past, as an illustrator, you'd often have a magazine file of clippings of people's faces, and then when the internet came along, you'd grab a Google image of someone's face. The problem with that, I found, was over time everyone's using the same faces. It's very easy to just grab a face off the internet or a head off the internet and use it in your illustrations. But also there was this issue of copyright. That person hasn't consented to having their image used, and sure, you wouldn't copy it directly. You'd embellish it a bit or change something a bit. And the second problem was you were restricted, very restricted to using that photograph, and that photograph then dictated what the illustration would look like, because you'd be using someone's likeness and maybe where the shadows fell on their face at the time of the photograph, and you weren't really able to change it too much. And so over the years, what I've been trying to do is develop my own techniques of drawing faces without reference. That's my ultimate goal. Create realistic looking portraits without reference. Okay, so what we've got here is my head drawing, and I've put the sketch onto a sheet of A4 photocopy paper and then gessoed that paper to protect the paper from the techniques I'm about to use, which will use a lot of water, ink, acrylic ink, and pencil. And so that we don't damage the paper, I've gessoed the surface. Then I've resketched the lines, the outer lines of the character's head, and then I'm going over it with blue. I've just decided I'm going to keep it really simple and just use a blue and red. They'll be the two colors I use for this illustration. And what I'm going to do is demonstrate the shadings on the face. I'm not using any reference from this other than the underlying sketch I did, which wasn't based on any reference either. What I'll do is I'm going to have the light coming from the front of the character, and that's going to light up certain features of the face. Now, using the planes of the face, I can work out where that light's going to fall. Now, what I haven't taken into account is, do I really understand the planes of the face? I've been asked over numerous times, can you do a video or do an explanation of the planes of the face? To be honest, I'm not even sure I understand the planes of the face from what I've read. My knowledge comes from observing the face over and over and over again. And when I did look at, say, Loomis's method for creating planes of the face, I could understand it, but I'm not so sure I use it that often in my illustrations. Ultimately, I do. Everyone's using some form of planes. Now, the planes, what they do is, instead of working on a surface and figuring out, okay, so how much is the shading going to vary as the surface curves away from us, or curves into light, or curves into shadow, what you're doing is creating a flat plane. And maybe you'll start off with two flat planes, so the shape might look like a cube, and then you can work out, okay, well, what side is going to be in shadow, what side will be in light, and then slowly add more angles to it until you end up with a curved surface. Rather than going straight from an idea to a curved surface, you're going from an idea, flat surfaces, working out the shading, and then you're adding your curves to those flat surfaces. I think this really helps because you're really emphasizing the shading. Shading is what is going to make an image that's completely fictional, made up in your mind, look real. Without shadows and light, there is no image. So too much light, you diffuse everything, it completely blows it out, and it's going to look like a white page. Too much dark, no light at all, you end up with a black page. So by having a balance between your light and darks, and figuring out exactly where those light and darks would be, the mind already sees that as a realistic looking image, because our brains interpret these things. It's difficult though to interpret it from our brain to our hand onto the paper. It takes a bit of practice, and the way I look at it is trying to sculpt the image rather than just figure out straight away, okay, where is light and dark. I have a basic understanding of where the shadow and light will fall, and then I will slowly build up those shadows. So most of the technique I used in this the idea was I would use the acrylic ink, watered down to almost like a watercolor consistency, to cover the entire image so that I'd have a base to work off, and then I can add more light or add more dark. And then for finer details, I was going in with the pencil. Now it was at this point where I went a bit too far. I went overboard. And as you can see, as I start to add more and more shadow to the face, it's creating this protrusion of his upper lip. It's making the upper lip look a little bit more forward. Now I couldn't pick up on it at first. I was wondering, well, what's happening here? And it's just those bits just around the sides of the nose, underneath just where the cheeks are, under the eye socket. You've got light, and then it suddenly dips into shadow. Now that makes it appear as though they're a flat surface, but they're like an overhang. They're going away. If the light is coming from front on, as you can see on his forehead, he almost has a glow effect there. If the forehead is slightly curved, that would mean the light is pretty much coming from the front. So therefore, these two parts above the cheek, just under the cheekbones, they should be in light as well, but I haven't noticed that. And that is why the planes are important. If I was following structures using the planes, I would have picked up on that straight away, but I didn't. And so I'm trying to compensate by fixing up other areas, thinking, well, maybe the shadow needs to be darker on the sides of the cheeks, around here. Maybe it's lighting. I need to add in some secondary light to the side of the head to give it more form. And I just haven't picked up on it. But if I'd noticed planes of the face first, then I would have worked that out. So I went in with a bit of black pencil too, to darken some areas, just to give a bit more definition to the outside lines of the face. I'm not so sure it worked that well. It's definitely contouring the face more and more and slimming it down and making it look less flat. I don't think I'd be doing that so deep again, because I had to go in later and I sprayed over with a bit more blue with the airbrush to try and soften those black lines. And in doing so, I went a bit too far again, and I've darkened more under the cheek. Can you believe I've done it again? And I've darkened under the eyes. I'm making it more and more moody. If the light source was coming from above, further above, then yes, the eye sockets would have been more dark like that, would have been in a deeper shadow. So that is something that I should have been aware of as I was doing this illustration. But I missed that completely. My train of thought at this point must have been to think, well, if I just coat it completely in blue, that will soften everything, that will even everything out. And no, it didn't, because all I'm doing is darkening the other areas again using the airbrush. And now I've had to go back in with black again to try and fix it again. Am I being too hard on myself? I don't know. I just at some point think, how many times can you make these mistakes? But without mistakes, you never ever learn how to fix them. So in doing this, I'm probably learning a big lesson for my next illustration. Okay, so I think it was by this point I managed to realize what I had done wrong. I think I had come to a point where I thought, okay, I've looked at it enough and it's wrong, I need help. And so I picked up a reference. I found some photos online and looked at some books of faces front on, and that's where I picked up, okay, the plane of the face under the eye socket, just above the cheek, it's flat and therefore it's going to be picking up more light. And that was the moment that I changed it and sorted out the problem of this face. So planes of the face definitely are a benefit to understand. I'm going to take more time and effort to understand the planes of the face when I'm drawing my characters. I, at the moment, probably look more at shading and details of the face, but I think what will help me more is understanding the planes of the face for my character drawings, because ultimately I want to understand how I can draw faces completely from imagination that look believable time and time again for each character. And I think the planes of the face are going to be the key to that. Alright, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a like. Leave a comment below if you have any suggestions for videos you'd like to see later. Okay, thanks. Bye.